our two graduate students from the Spanish. Well, Maria is actually in the music department. Celia is in the languages department. So the session title that brings us together today is Race and Gender in Spain. And Celia is listed as the first speaker and Maria as the second. So I'm going to introduce Celia first. And as I indicated, she is a student, graduate student, the first year graduate student at UNCG in the Languages, Literatures and Cultures department. And this essay results from her class that she took in the fall 2020, Feminist Poetics. She's from Spain and came to the US 2 years ago. So Celia, the floor is yours.
Black women in Spain, construction and deconstruction of national identity based on the concept of beauty. In this presentation, I am studying the book La Mujer Negra en España by Desiree Vela Lovede. This study explores the process of building the national identity of a Spanish woman of African descent. It is a complex process that also hinders her personal identity process, sometimes feeling denied or invisible. In her book, the author shows through her experiences the processes of construction and deconstruction of her identity in relation to her vision of beauty and in contrast to Black beauty with the ideal of Spanish beauty. Theoretical framework and key concepts. Aesthetics, history, culture, and politics converge in this essay. For this, I would like to clarify some key concepts. Aesthetic concepts, canon of beauty, certain characteristics that society in general considers attractive, desirable, and beautiful. This canon can vary between different cultures and over time. For example, ideal Spanish woman prototype is usually represented as a woman with light skin, but with black hair and dark eyes. Aesthetic activism. To fight against the pressure exerted by this canon, especially on Black women, and to defend the diversity of female beauty, Desiree Vela Lovede proposes aesthetic activism. Aesthetic activism is a type of activism that provides Black women with resources to learn how to take care of natural Afro hair and also Black skin, thus promoting their self-esteem and improving their self-concept. Historical and cultural concepts that affect the condition of Black women in Spain. Post-colonialism. It is not only the historical period began in 1947 with the decolonization of Africa and Asia, but also the field of study of the effects of the colony that still persist in the colonized countries and their inhabitants. Diaspora is another key concept in this essay, means dispersion of human groups leaving their place of origin. In Spain, historical context. In Spain, this difficulty in identifying what is Spanish has to do with its colonial past. For example, although the Spaniards mixed with the Indian in America, they never came to consider them Spaniards because of their physical and cultural differences and associate those differences with barbarism and savagery. During the colony and the following years of colonization, three social groups were established: Spaniards, Indian, and Black people. The Spaniards came from Spain or were the sons of Spaniards. The Indians were the native of the American continent, and the Black people were slaves of Africa. It was an unfair system because it marked a clear hierarchy between the different groups, discriminating and creating disadvantages for those who were not descendants of Spaniards without mixture. Although Africans currently account for 2.4% of the Spanish population, the Spanish society has not generally considered them Spanish. In order to understand this phenomenon, some historical events must be analyzed. At the end of the 1980s, the most important factor in attracting migrants was the economic development experienced by Spain as a result of its accession to the European Economic Community in 1985. Due to the growth of construction and tourism, the Spanish economy began to require a large amount of labor. Mass immigration in the late 2000s mark a shift in the vision of Africans. The growth of immigration is linked to an increase in the Negrophobia of neo-Nazi and ultra-right groups, and to the distrust or disinformation of the working class when it sees the immigrant as a competitor. The Spaniards blame immigration for the increase in crime and the fact that wages have fallen. Is it possible for Black women to build their national identity in Spain? Desiree Vela-Lobede, November 24th, 1978, is an Afro-Spanish writer and communicator, and an Equatorial Guinean descendant. Although she feels Spanish because her parents are Spanish and she was born in Spain, in her book, she expresses that she feels invisible in Spain because she does not fit into the Spanish construct. In her experience, saying she's Spanish is never enough, and she's always asked about her family tree. She feels perceived as the other, and points out that calling herself Spanish becomes an exercise of faith and constant reaffirmation. In recounting personal experiences in her book, she shows that because she is a Black, she has had to live difficult and uncomfortable situations. Difficulties in the process of building national identity, micro-racisms in language and in society. 1. The exorcisation of Black women. The author claims that the exorcisation of minority women is a very dangerous fact because it can lead to racist and sexist behavior toward women already marginalized in the Spanish society. 2. The language used by some men to initiate a conversation with Black women using racist expressions. These first ways of starting the dialogue often make them look different. 3. Stereotypes about how sex is with Black women. She has had to deal with unpleasant and explicit sexual expressions, especially in the nighttime environment. Vela-Lobede notes that possibly this topic was born in a colonial context, but announces that many of those stereotypes, unfortunately, continue to be transmitted through the world of porn, music video, and urban legends. 4. Prejudices against mixed couples. She says that the idea of convenience always orbits around mixed couples. There are still people who believe that the Black person is with a white person out of ulterior motives. The author would like to emphasize that currently in Spain, there are more and more Black women, immigrants or not, who have university degrees, who have a stable economy and who do not depend on their partner. All this micro-racism make Desiree and many more Black women in Spain feel different. This type of behavior normalizes violent behavior and makes racism invisible. In addition, all of them contribute to the linking the Blackness of the Spanish identity. Looking for the national identity. Desiree describes her journey through several chapters. In her childhood, Desiree recalls the long and painful Sunday afternoons on which her mother braided her hair. The author admits that she did not like her day and related to burns, jerks, and silent crying. In her youth, her mother began to ask her for an appointment at the hairdresser to straighten her hair. Remember the itching and burning of that chemical process, and also remembering that there is where aesthetic slavery began. From that day on, she repeated that chemical smoothing every 3 months through her adolescence and youth. With the adult stage and motherhood came a new perspective. She was tired of straightening her hair and also didn't want her daughters to go through the same process. So she decided to wear natural hair. She decided for a matter of health, but also for a matter of liberation, to stop subjecting herself to a canon of beauty that did not represent her. So she had her hair cut. Reflecting on her aesthetic transformation, she laments the lack of references of Black women she has had. All these experiences show that aesthetics is linked to politics. If Black women in Spain have not had references, it is because the Spanish institutions, as well as the media, have not provided them. All of this was done with a clear purpose, to make them feel invisible. The aesthetic activism. Vela-Lobede comments that since she decided to cut all her hair and return to her natural hair, she also decided to create a beauty blog. In addition, she created a section where other readers could write their experiences. Later, she opened a YouTube channel to reach more people, especially more young people. She called her work aesthetic activism. she defines it as a form of activism that involves giving resources to Black women to learn how to take care of their skin and hair. Aesthetic activism also involves decolonizing the body, not just the mind. The author points out that living in a society as eminently white as the Spanish, talking about Afro hair is also talking about identity. She wants Black women to learn to accept and love each other as they are, moving away from the canon of white beauty, by which they try to modify their bodies to feel more loved and accepted. Currently, Bella Lobede is a blogger, communicator, and activist with a great role in social media, thanks to her YouTube videos. She also collaborates with a feminist digital magazine, where she writes about current affairs, Afroactivism, feminism, and racism. Analyzing the process of construction of the identity of the author, we find a phase of construction of the national identity through trying to assimilate characteristics of a canon of beauty that is not hers, when in her youth she decided to straighten her hair. We later observe a phase corresponding to the process of deconstruction of the idea of national identity. This phase happened during her adulthood, when she decided to stop straightening her hair and leave it as afro. In this way, she goes on to accept their differences and become actively involved in aesthetic activism in public media. That process culminated in the publication of her book, La Mujer Negra en España, where Bella Lobede talks about her process and experiences, and defends that there is a non-white Spain, and that it is necessary to embrace these differences and fight for everyone to be considered Spanish. Conclusions. The construction of the personal and national identity of Black women in Spain is a difficult and multifactorial process. Aesthetics and canons of beauty affect the way they create their self-concept and self-esteem, essential concepts to form a healthy personal identity. This fact disempowers them and makes them take a secondary position, which affects their lives. Thanks to authors such as Desiree Bella Lobede and her aesthetic activism, the concept of women beauty is changing, being broader, more diverse, and inclusive. For all those people living in the diaspora, the construction of national identity is a complex and constantly evolving issue. But for women, is it even more so? These women live in constant denial. They have not had references to look at. They are not visible by the institutions, by the media, or by their society as a part of the country to which they belong. The notion of national identity as something static and close, I believe is no longer valid, but must be plural and dynamic. It must be a negotiated social construct that is inclusive and flexible and adapts to the changes in its country society. The personal and national identity of this woman of African descent has been and continues to be transformed by history, culture, and power. The dominant structures of the West use their power to make us see and make Black people feel like the others. Now it's up to us to get out of that manipulation game and see beyond what separates us and start to see what united us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Celia. Thank you for your presentation. And if everyone is okay with it, we are going to have a Q&A at the end. So now I'm going to introduce Maria. And everyone, please take notes about your questions for the end. But let's go on. Maria Menendez is a doctoral student at UNCG, specializing in music. She has a master's degree in chamber music and collaborative piano from University of Miami, Florida, where she lived for several years before settling in South Carolina. Moved to Greensboro in 2020 upon joining UNCG as a teacher assistant, TA. Maria is of Cuban origin and has lived in Mexico, Colombia, and Puerto Rico, and has undergone the process of adaptation to different cultural groups. Welcome, Maria, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, and good evening for everybody. So The work that I'm presenting today is different. It's very different than what Celia was doing. But Celia's work gave us a general idea, like a framework about what is the situation of the Spanish Black women nowadays. So now we will transition with my work to a more specific topic, because we will be talking about fear and how what is the interaction of fear with gender and race in this case. I will be reading a paper, or at least a portion of a paper that I originally wrote for a class, for the Spanish class, and it's based in one story by Lucia Bomio. Lucia, it is a Spanish journalist. She works as a reporter for a TV show. She's descended from a Spanish mother, and her father is from Equatorial Guinea. She also is a writer. We published a book in 2017 called Las que se atrevieron, Those Who Dared, which is a compilation of stories of white women who married men from Equatorial Guinea. Later on in 2019, she published a novel called Daughter of the Way. And this is a story of a girl that belonged to two worlds, Spain and Africa. And the mixture of the two realities is what enriches her life. So in this context, we will go directly to the story by Lucia Bomio that we'll be analyzing today. The name is follación, and later in the paper I will explain the term and so the meaning of the term, and well, you will see. So let's go to this. Fear is not an easily approachable issue because it involves exposing situations that are difficult to tell and sometimes remain ignored as things that do not happen, but that are stored in the mind, affecting our behavior and limiting life experience. The collection of stories under the title Tranquilas, which is quiet, highlights the problem of fear in women. Any of the meanings of this word, quiet, silent, private, may be applied to the life of a woman, and especially when race is a factor involved. Some of the stories expose this issue of attitude toward racial stereotypes. The collection was edited by the Spanish writers Maria Folguera and Carmen de la Cueva and contains the personal experiences of 14 Hispanic women writers. We find in this collection stories that allow us to see how society and the family reinforce and transmit fear in a conscious and unconscious way and negatively influence thinking and behavior. The dissemination of these stories is aimed to promote a change in women behaviors in the face of gender violence and highlight that making them visible contributes to the empowerment of women, especially when several significant categories like gender, ethnicity, and race are carried simultaneously. The story Follación by Lucia Bomio addresses the intersection of fear, gender, and race. It uses as a title, a made-up term to avoid referring directly to an act of rape. Sometimes we create words to name what prevents us from getting into some situations. Bomio exposes the problem of a woman's tendency to hide traumatic events in her memory. Sometimes she calls it forgetfulness. She talks about how difficult it is to deal with mental blocks in relation to unpleasant and traumatic situations because they work from the subconscious. The story told by Lucia Bomio contains 3 episodes. 2 belong to her friends who were victims of rape, and the third is her own. In the stories of her friends, there is a significant aspect. The way the girls referred to the event where they saved their lives, by choosing not to resist the sexual assault. When the word follación was created, eh, it was created by one of them, one of their friends, in an attempt to normalize the abnormal by pretending that the body separates from the mind. The story, the third story, told in first person, describes her own traumatic experience, blurred in memory for a long time. She considered herself a strong woman, combative, determined not to allow disrespect due to her race and gender. But the moment to find herself closer to danger came for her. In this story, she's telling us something that really happened, but she's changing the names of the characters. And when she refers to a man in this story, she calls him monster, monstruo. So in her encounters with monstruo, that's the name that she uses to refer to the man in each story, she naturally um, gave this man a lot of information about her as part of the conversation routine. This story occurred through in a series of uh, travels when they are traveling together, moving from one city to another in this kind of service that they like a long distance carpooling service that they have. They call blah blah car, and then that is practically the 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 place in which the story occurs. So after a period of time traveling with him, she felt comfortable enough to not mistrust the intentions of this man until he revealed his true nature. An important point of reflection is the attitude of the perpetrator, manipulating his victim by gaining her trust and using the data he collected to plan an attempted rape. He instilled all possible fear in her, described the disadvantaged situation in which she found herself, and how he took her to that point. The psychological response to fear is complex for both parties. And when reflecting on rape situations, a typical female response is to withdraw and allow the aggressor to proceed. It is logical because of the physical strength of the man, but masculine empowerment begins in the mind. And many times, before having raised his hand, the man has won the game by the mere fact of intimidating his victim. Fear paralyzes, as expressed by Bomio while describing the physical changes that she perceived in her skin and inside her when she felt in danger. When fear is exacerbated, it can prevent a timely reaction. Another point that stands out in Follación is the assumption of hypersexuality, exoticism, and control of Black women as a driver of inappropriate behavior on the part of men. Race is also an important factor in establishing control and violence against women. The aggressor sees race as a stimulating factor due to the stereotypes of Black women. The idea of the exacerbated sexual behavior of Black women is a social myth that can be the trigger for acts like this. According to the man of this story, pers- uh, according to his perspective in his story, the woman is a being that they can take advantage of at any time. Being Black adds an extra component that makes the women of this story more sensitive to aggression. The man in this story feels physically and intellectually superior and capable of controlling his victim. He also contemplates his escape route to avoid legal consequences. Many concepts are socially infused into us to perpetuate fear and turn people into controllable beings. Male superiority is among them, and it is a cultural element that legitimizes and justifies the violent actions of men against women. The storytelling Follación offered different responses to fear, violence, and racial abuse. On one hand, the normalization of the negative and traumatic event as expressed in the stories of the two friends. Supposedly for them, normalizing the abnormal allows the woman to psychologically overcome the rape suffered or to believe that she has overcome it. They settle for feeling peace because they have not lost their life, but they do not evolve seeking to be more efficient in another risky circumstance. According to Bomio, overcoming the condition of forgetfulness and the silence derived from shame when telling what happened helps to experience a liberating sensation, unloading a great psychological weight. On the other hand, there is the attitude of fighting and rebelling against abuse and inequality. Foyacion also alludes to the fact that the patriarchal system ingrained in our society favors dominant male behavior and the existence of monsters who commit atrocities against women. This is one of the situations that needs to be exposed as much as possible to foster social change. The intention of the author is to reflect on fear, recognize that it exists in our lives, and is that taking risk is a natural part of our existence. Hiding problems does not make them disappear. Instead, it keeps us in the mentality of fear. One of the tools we have is to make them visible and draw the attention of society to them, and to reevaluate the behavior that induces manifestation of hatred, discrimination, racism, and violence of any kind. Despite the fact that not all the situations we face can be changed, as Roberta Marrero, who is another writer in this collection, uh, nothing can be changed until you face it. Facing situations, the negative emotion that arises from them helps to learn not to be a victim, to gain experience and feel we have the power to transform reality, leaving the limited mentality behind. Exposing the problem and making it visible through literature, for example, helps to create support networks and bring to light facts that must be reported. Lucia Bomio refers to this type of writing as a healing literature, since by sharing stories using autofiction, the narrative voice finds a vehicle to release the emotional charge and reflect on its dilemma, while relating to an audience that may be facing similar problems. In the same way that concepts and stereotypes are built in society, they can also be modified when the voices that draw attention to them appear. When exposing stories like this, we find how the different categories of race, gender, and ethnicity are intertwined. Going through the wound of speaking in first person about the fear that violence generates is part of the learning that lead us to free ourselves from victimization. I understand that it's very positive to read and discuss literary works such like this collection, whose stories help promote a change in the female mentality and promote a different social attitude in relation to gender and racial violence. This is it.
Estupendo, muy bien. Muchas gracias, María. Muchas gracias, Celia. And thank you both for your presentations. I'm just going to show the book that Maria was referring to. This is Tranquilas, is the collection of these stories about gender violence in Spain, and all these writers were invited to offer their personal experiences in sharing commonalities and experiences around gender violence. And Lucia kind of also included the angle of race in her story in this collection. So I would like everyone now who is present through the Q&A, please share if you have a question. We'll be more than happy to entertain those questions for our presenters. I think the way is through the Q&A. If there are no questions, then I would like to perhaps start the conversation with both of you and regard with perhaps the idea, Celia, what is interesting to me is the idea of beauty and nation, right? And the aesthetic activism. I'm sure that you've done a little bit of reading and how Bella is creating or giving shape to his own understanding of aesthetic activism. Have you read her book? Is there an idea that struck you as significant, knowing that you and me are from Spain and we know what it means to be Spanish, right? The idea of the national prototype. And now there are many people who don't fit into this prototype. And now we have a large population of African descent, people who don't fit in this struggle. So in order to change, not to fit, but to change the prototype, really, to make it more inclusive, in the sense that it was always, I mean, we've always had diversity in Spain. It's just the prototype reduces the idea of Spanishness. So how can we really recognize the actual presence of diversity in Spain? And what was attractive to you in the activism of Bella in this regard?
I think that one of the ideas in the book that make me think most is about the complaint that most of them they have about the lack of references, especially in the TV. Because me as a white person, I didn't pay attention to that, but it's true that now in Spain it's starting to, you can see like Black people in TV realities or in the news or in more programs. But it has been very difficult to build an idea of what is to be a Black woman in Spain when you don't see anywhere, or when they feel that they were alone in their school, in their middle school. So I think that they has affect a lot to that generation. But they're saying that thanks to social media, internet, YouTube, all these new things, young people have more access and they can communicate their ideas. So I think that now there is hope because it's changing a lot.
Because there is a sense of community. I guess the activism is also creating community and communicating with those who share common experiences. And through this sharing and this community, there is a visibility, a platform also for action and change. So that, I guess, is the younger generations are going in that direction. When we interviewed Lucia, and she also came recently 2 weeks ago, she discussed this issue, but her tone was very negative. I'm not sure if you remember the interview we had with her, or the last one. Like, she talked about this idea of nacionalismo, national, and she doesn't believe in that. Like, she feels a strong disaffection toward the idea of nation, Spanish nation, because the Spanish nation does not recognize her. But then she started to talk about a different concept, barrionalismo, which is the neighborhoodism. Like, she feels a strong connection and belonging to the smaller community, her neighborhood, her barrio, and where she is recognized and she's given a space and she's treated as Lucia. And so that was interesting, how in order to change nationalist idea of, she gave up on that. It's like, for now I'm going to focus in my barrio, in my barrionalismo, and this is where I feel I belong. I thought that was interesting.
I think it's interesting, but at the same time it's sad, because that means that the country is not doing a good job. Because if she's a citizen for paying taxes and for doing all their things, she should be also a space where they can feel included.
Yeah, I sensed a kind of, sensed in a sense of getting tired when the last interviews we have had with Lucia, because she's been very kind to speak with us. I get that feeling too of her being exhausted. Like right now they are trying to have a discussion with those people who the curriculum, the national curriculum, to make it more inclusive and diverse. and they're just starting with that type of conversation in Spain. So it's a slow motion, a slow process. But at the same time, like being tired, there is this, well, but things are happening. There is some conversations happening, and it's just a lot of work. what she was
I think that what is important is that now kids in the school, they're more used to diversity. So these kids, when they will become adults, they will be different.
Yeah, I personally grew up in Spain that, yeah, this is 1990s, 1970s, 1980s. The Spain that I grew up was very homogeneous in many regards. If there were differences, there were class differences, not so much. And of course, the gender gap, the gender problem. Okay, Maria. So what was the idea of fear and emotions, and how facing your fear is the way to, I guess, start change, initiate change? If you want things to be different, the first step is face your emotions, in particular fear.
Yeah, I think, yeah, face the emotion and also share, okay, raise your voice about, make it visible, you know, raise your voice about what has happened. And also, and let me go back to your idea of barrionalism. I think that applied a little bit because the changes should start somewhere. And this is one of the, okay, this is a small environment, the neighborhood, but little by little, you know, the voice will be spreading and it will be pushing, especially people like writers, that they have a voice in society, which is very important, that they have the opportunity to make things visible, things that are important, things in which, as you said, society changes are perceived are going in slow motion, because nothing is happening. It's not a straight line for us to perceive a change of this kind of change. Especially we have to change mentality, and that is not a straight line. There are a lot of, you know, setbacks. It's difficult to move in just one direction.
Yeah, I think that this book, this Tranquila's book, which is about voicing, and it's a very difficult book to read because it voices and represents biographical episodes that had to do with violence. So you have to read it with this caution and be aware that it can be very sensitive to some of us. But the willingness of women and women from different backgrounds to share in these experiences and make them publicly available. And white women, poor women, rich women, and Black women, and women from different places from society, they seem to find this particular experience that they can all relate to. And each of them with a variant, right? One of them talk about the variant of class, being poor, and how being poor brings more violence. The variants of being poor and Black, the variants of being poor and white, so, or rich. And so there are all these places in which one can meet this moment of violence that the book tries to give voice to. Well, I recommend it, although it's a very difficult book to read. And Lucia shared this experience, not so much also, I mean, in addition to talking about her own experience, she's also interviewing friends and gathering experiences from them. So again, this sad moment in which women get together to discuss this problem. And what was striking about Lucia's narrative was also the banality with which, like, how women, in order to survive this trauma, develop a sense of protection that is around minimalizing, like removing the pain, like making it trivial, as if, well, now it's my turn to survive this moment. And that was very, very moving in how she portrayed this strategy to survive, for women to survive this aggression, gender aggression. Anyone, Maria, anything else?
Well, no, I think that it is as you said, very hard book to read, but it is the only way to, make a difference, just to bring stories like this to the public light. And then in sharing the experience, it is also an opportunity to heal, because you face that there are a lot of people that have been going through the similar problems, and there is a big amount of women in that kind of situation. So it's really good to bring into the light.
Thank you, Maria. Anybody would like to throw a question to the panelists? If not, it's 7:40. I know it's we've been here discussing for 40 minutes. We only have 2 panelists.
I am seeing a question.
Oh, you do? Because I don't see anything. The question.
It says, what is the role of Afro-Latina women in Latina communities? What are the similarities to the African-American women experiences?
Well, you know what? I can start with that, because I have seen not only similarities with African American women, with also white women in America. But it is in every country, and it's happened to me too. When you move to a different country, you try to find a group to whom you belong. But sometimes you have to just to open yourself and try to integrate to a different reality. And that is a process of adaptation that we all immigrants are going through. And we all belong to the same source. That's something that I believe. We all have, even if you are a African-American, white, or you're Latino, whatever, we all belong to the same source. And we got going through the same process of human beings that we all are. And of course, there are similarities between the life of all of us as human beings. We go through the same mental process. We got fears. It's the same. This situation that Lucia is telling us in the book applies to women here in America too, and in Latin America too. Also applies to all kind of women. It doesn't matter.
But don't you think that there is? Do you think that there is less racism in Latin America? That like there's more mix of people and they are more integrated in society?
There is, we talk less about it, and I can relate that question to my own experience. We talk less, but the difference still are there. Yeah, there are differences. We talk less about it, but we also, feel natural to be around people that are really different than you. It feels more natural. So you get not, feel that sense of separation from another person. No, because I didn't grow up like that, and I the difference are there. It's difficult for the human being not to focus on differences. It's difficult. That's something that you will find that in every human group. When you have to focus on the difference, but how important is not make this difference something negative. That I think that is the most important, because difference is part of the variety, and variety is all around in nature.
But I think that what is important is what you say about being close to you, because if you don't have any Black person in your family, it's difficult that you connect it. But for example, in Latin America, I think that there is more mixed families, more mixed couples.
Yeah, but you know that one advantage of that, of being surrounded with different people, curiosity. Because when you see a person that is totally different, you approach to that person with curiosity, not with something negative in mind. And that was the only difference.
I think that's a great curiosity in how to approach the difference, right? And one of you, I think, mentioned about language. And what is it that we need to do? How do we approach language? So through language and through changing language, we change our relationship with the world, others. Through language, we also convey a lot of microaggressions, right? I think Lucia and Bella discussed this not so overt racisms, but the micro racism that are embedded in the language, in Spanish language in particular. So have you read anything by Lucia or Bella about their approach to language and how to work? Because
I
after
think
all,
that they are tired of stereotypes. And I think that they think that it's time to move on. If it's not good that the same stereotypes that happened in the 60s, in the 70s, you can find now in porn, in TV programs, they say in music, in video clips. So they think that we should start changing all of this and erasing of that stereotypes because they are really dangerous.
mm-hmm. Right, it seems like the same stereotypes are like almost like old-fashioned. It's like it seems to repeat in Spain, which is like, come on, Spaniards, can we move on from the old use of language? But then what Lucia was actually indicating in her interviews is like the resistance of the Spanish society to introduce the slightest change to accommodate another presence in the Spanish landscape, cultural landscape. But there is this attachment, strong attachment to tradition and the way things have always been and how things have always been spoken about. And I think that's where the frustration Lucia was trying to convey is like in Spain in particular, as this country unique, is this attachment to tradition and closeness. And that's where she's like almost finding impossible, well, not impossible, but difficult for change because of the particular mentality of the Spanish culture in Spain. I mean, as a Spaniard, is like, yeah, I get it. I understand this strong attachment to tradition, even if it's a wrong tradition and a wrong understanding of the world, right? But then again, this problem of language. How do we change language? How do we reshape the world through language? And how can we, and I know there is a whole lot of controversy in Spain about the problem of language, even like the academia, the La Real Academia always comes out in how things are supposed to be said, right? And it's another stumbling block in how to the gender, for instance, the problem with the gender and how to make the language of Spanish a little more neutral.
There is another question.
Okay, another question, please. Noel, please go ahead. Do you want to read it, Celia?
No, you can read.
No, go ahead.
Okay. If national identity is tied to patriarchy, it seems to me understandable to abandon national identity in favor of barrio or neighborhood province. Maybe there is more space for building women voices and power. That being invested in nation is to continue to deny women's agency.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very familiar with my culture, with Spanish culture, and you totally nailed it here, Noel. The problem of a nation as a very patriarchal, male-oriented, and of course white, and yeah, and how that's why Lucia is abandoned the idea of identifying with a nation, and she has abandoned the idea for her reasons. You know, there was a moment in which I also felt, what has Spain done for me? Like, it's been a long time since I abandoned my identification with Spain for this particular reason, but for me it was more as a woman, and the microaggressions toward women. And I can't imagine Lucia and Bella, the microaggressions toward women and Black women in Spain, which is, I think, different from Latin America. Because here we're discussing Spain. And thank you, Maria, for being here, so you can bring the idea of Latin America as well into the discussion. But yeah, I think that Spain is a patriarchal, very male centered, and also Western canon, Western culture centered. And the attachment to tradition makes it very difficult for change. Maria, perhaps you're right that in Latin America there is more fluid.
Well, but we have to take into account that we inherit a lot of things from Spain.
Okay.
It is really strong in our base. Yes, my grandparents from the side of my mother were Spaniards, and I still remember the way, and I know the stories of how my mother was raised, and another, still we got that attached, that mentality, because that is part of who we are also, that tradition. But life evolves, and the times are different now, and we have to move on with the things that are happening right now. So I understand what you said about tradition, how we are holding a lot of our modus operandi. It's still, we want to go back to what we did before, what our parents were, but maybe we in Latin America, it's like a melting pot. There are people from everywhere, and then you are more exposed to differences, to face differences. And also you have to abandon, in many cases, you have to emigrate to another country. And then you have to exercise your ability to integrate to different things. And that is the way in which you train yourself, or you develop yourself as a human being in the face of differences with another human.
Great. Yeah, the idea of negotiation differences, right? That's the big question that is still pending. Anybody else? Kalia, thank you for your comment. That's very kind of you. Thank you, Noel, for your question. We appreciate your engagement with the conversation. I think that the panel is a discussion around Spanish culture in connection to gender and race. And I guess what's for us to take out of this conversation is how it is such a work in progress, and how we have a strong presence, a strong voices right now in the Spanish cultural landscape, like Lucia, like Bella, like also Julia Alvarez, like there is another artist whose name is Silvia Alberto Sopales. She is Basque, from the north, Española, Negra, Vasca actress, and she has put together a show that is titled No es País para Negras. And these are just three voices that are very active in the social media, in not only social media, but in the media, the mainstream media, and trying to bring awareness and have a lively conversation. Also very strong in political views, like politics, like Lucia was telling us how they were they were appointing a white woman as the chair of the diversity committee in the government. And then Lucia started this movement like, no, it has to be a minority, it has to be someone. And then they changed and appointed someone who was more appropriate to this committee. So the activism of Lucia is working, and her presence in everywhere, and that's why she's exhausted. But is helping to change the culture, and I guess that's what we're supposed. I mean, I would like all of us to take out of this conversation how we have strong voices really making a difference and bringing change. Okay, well, thank you, Noel, for your. I'm glad that you enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, Kalia. Are we ready then to go, Kalia?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everyone for joining today. This is the last panel for today. Tomorrow, CACE begins again. Thank you all for joining, and thank you, Anna Hontanilla, for this wonderful for moderating, and our amazing panelists. You all have an amazing night. I would say get home safe, but you're already comfortably in your homes. So you all have.
I'm sorry, but somebody's asking, will the recording be available later?
Yes, so give us until the last day for CACE is tomorrow. So give us to the next day, because we want to upload all of them to YouTube. I'll go through, and anyone who has attended will get a nice email from me with the link to where you can view all of them, but they will become public after all of the panels and research presentations are given.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kalia, for all your hard work. Can't
Absolutely.
imagine. Can't imagine.
Yes.
But keep it up.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Noel.
Bye.
For the rest of the evening, everyone. Thank you, Maria and Celia.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.